The night it all began wasn't supposed to be special. It was just another Friday, the kind where I'd order takeout, wait for his call, and scroll through photos of us pretending everything was perfect. Ethan had promised me he'd come over. He said he'd bring dessert from my favorite bakery, the same one we used to visit when we were still new, still happy, still us. But when 9 turned into 10, and 10 turned into midnight, I knew something was wrong. I called once. No answer. Twice. Straight to voicemail. By the third try, I stopped. My heart already knew what my mind refused to accept. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at the phone, waiting for the screen to light up like a fool, hoping technology could fix love. Then it happened. The screen did light up, but it wasn't his call. It was a message. From someone I didn't know, a name I'd never seen before. But the preview, that one line I saw before opening it, was enough to tear my world apart. He's with me tonight. Don't wait up. At first, I thought it was a joke. Some prank, maybe. But deep down, my chest tightened. My breathing slowed. Because the truth doesn't need proof. It just feels different. Still, I opened the message. A picture followed. Ethan. My Ethan. Laughing. Arm around another woman. At the same bakery he promised to bring me dessert from. That one image replayed in my mind like a cruel movie scene, the kind where the protagonist realizes the plot twist too late. The sound around me faded. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there silent. Because betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the kind of pain that doesn't make a sound but echoes for a lifetime. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I don't know. All I remember is the rain tapping against the window, almost mocking the tears I refused to let fall. He texted me later. Sorry, got caught up with work. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. Work. He was still lying. I stared at that message for so long, the words blurred. Then something inside me, something small, quiet but fierce, came alive. It wasn't anger. Not yet, it was clarity. I realized I had two choices. Break apart quietly like every other time I'd been hurt. Or end the game my way. That night, I didn't sleep. I deleted the photo. Deleted the message. But I didn't delete the memory. Because that picture, that proof, wasn't just pain anymore. It was power. And for the first time in months, I smiled. A calm, steady smile. He thought he'd fooled me. But he had no idea the game had just begun, and this time, I was going to play it better. People always talk about the beginning of love like it's a fairy tale, the spark, the butterflies, the way time slows down when your eyes meet. But in real life, love doesn't arrive with violins or magic. It comes quietly. It feels normal, until it doesn't. That's exactly how Ethan walked into my life, casually, like he'd always been meant to be there. It was a chilly autumn morning at the small coffee shop near my office. I was late, like always, and my hair was still damp from a rushed shower. I remember bumping into someone as I tried to grab my usual latte from the counter. My coffee almost spilled, and his reflexes were faster than mine. He caught the cup midair and smiled. Careful there. I'd hate to be responsible for ruining someone's Monday. That was Ethan, charming, confident, the kind of man who always had something to say that made you smile even when you didn't want to. I laughed awkwardly and thanked him. He introduced himself, and before I knew it, he was walking me to work, making small talk about how Mondays were just misunderstood Fridays. By the time I reached my building, I didn't realize I'd given a stranger my number, but something about him felt familiar, safe even, like someone who'd never hurt me. Oh, how wrong I was. We started texting, then calling, then meeting for dinners that turned into long drives. Ethan had this way of making ordinary moments feel cinematic. He'd look at me across the table and say, "You know, you make silence sound beautiful." I used to blush when he said things like that. I used to think he meant them. He worked in real estate, at least. That's what he told me, and his schedule was chaotic. But even when he was busy, he'd find time to send a good morning text or a voice note saying he missed me. Those little gestures built a world I thought was real. He made me feel seen, and for someone who'd spent years hiding behind other people's needs, that feeling was addictive. Every time I doubted myself, Ethan was there, encouraging, gentle, patient. When I got a promotion at work, he was the first to show up with flowers. When I was sick, he showed up with soup and his old hoodie that still smelled like his cologne. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my calm, or so I believed. 3 months in, we had our first argument. I don't even remember what it was about something small, something silly. Maybe I asked too many questions about where he'd been that weekend. Maybe I didn't like that he kept his phone face down whenever we were together. He got defensive. "You don't trust me, do you?" he asked, his voice sharp. I told him it wasn't that I just wanted to understand him better. He sighed and smiled that same disarming smile. "I get it, you've been hurt before, but I'm not like them." Those 5 words became my weakness. I'm not like them. Every time he said it, my guard dropped a little more. 6 months later, we were inseparable. Ethan had a key to my apartment. He'd cook breakfast on weekends and play his favorite songs while pretending to dance badly. He'd hold me and whisper about our future, about traveling to Italy, buying a small place near the beach, naming our first dog Milo. He made dreams sound easy, and I let myself believe in them. But even in those perfect moments, there were cracks, small ones I refused to see. Sometimes he'd vanish for a few days. No texts, no calls. Then reappear with excuses that sounded too smooth to question. "Work's been crazy. My mom wasn't feeling well. Phone died, sorry babe." And I, desperate to keep the illusion alive, accepted every excuse. Because when you love someone, you stop looking for proof. You just believe. Then came the birthdays. Mine, he made unforgettable dinner on a rooftop, fairy lights, a small cake he claimed he baked himself, though I later noticed the box from a local bakery in his car. I laughed it off. Because who cares, right? He tried. He cared. On his birthday, I planned something special. A surprise trip to the lake, just the 2 of us. But the night before, he called. "I'm so sorry, love. My boss needs me to travel for a deal." Rain check. My chest sank, but I smiled through the phone. "Of course, I understand." He promised to make it up to me. He always promised that. I didn't know it then, but that same weekend he was in town not for work, but with her. I found out later that he'd been seeing someone else for months. Her name was Lila, a soft-spoken girl who worked in marketing. The kind of girl you'd never suspect could be the other woman. From what I later learned, Ethan had been balancing both of us, crafting lies with the precision of an artist. To me, he was the devoted boyfriend. To her, he was the man who was trying to leave a relationship for her. He played his parts perfectly. He didn't just cheat. He performed. But before that truth came crashing down, I was still living in the illusion, the warm, perfect lie. We went on a weekend trip to the mountains. It was beautiful foggy mornings, long hikes, laughter echoing through the trees. One evening, as we sat near the fire, Ethan held my hand and said, "You're my peace, you know that." I smiled, then promised me you'll never hurt me. He kissed my forehead. I could never. I believed him. Every single word. That was the night I realized how much I loved him. But I also remember how, later, when he thought I was asleep, he walked out onto the balcony to take a call. His voice was low, careful, and he said something that didn't fit, not with the man I thought he was. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. Stop worrying." I opened my eyes slowly, but I told myself I'd misheard, because it's easier to rewrite a moment than accept the truth in it. When we returned home, things went back to normal. The same laughs, the same goodnight messages, the same rhythm. But inside me, something had shifted, a quiet unease I couldn't explain. I started noticing details. The faint scent of a different perfume on his hoodie, the way he'd flinch when I reached for his phone, the sudden new password on his laptop. And yet I kept pretending. Because love makes fools out of the smartest hearts. One evening we were having dinner. He seemed distracted, checking his phone every few minutes, smiling faintly at messages he didn't share. I asked him, "Who are you texting?" He said, "Just work stuff." "Work stuff at 11 p.m. I pressed, half joking. He looked up, his smile tightening. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" I laughed it off, said I was kidding. But the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know and everything I wasn't ready to face. Looking back now, I see all the signs that I missed or chose to ignore. The half-truths, the delayed replies, the growing distance wrapped in fake warmth. But at that time, all I saw was love. Or maybe the idea of love. I'd built my world around him and he'd built his around lies. I didn't know it then, but that night, when he said, "I'll always choose you," he'd already chosen someone else. Love, I learned, isn't destroyed in one moment. It fades quietly, piece by piece, every time someone says I'm busy instead of I miss you. Every time a promise sounds more like a performance. And when it finally shatters, when the truth explodes in front of you, it's not just the relationship that breaks. It's the version of yourself that believed in it. That's what Ethan took from me long before I found that message. Not just my trust, my certainty. The version of me that believed love was always kind. Died quietly in his shadow. But here's the thing about pain: once it wakes you up, you can't go back to sleep. And once I saw who he really was, I couldn't unsee it. That's when the shift began. When heartbreak started turning into clarity. The girl who cried over his lies was gone, and the woman who'd write her own ending was born. They say the truth doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, whispering through the spaces between what's said and what's left unsaid. For me, it began with a single moment of doubt, a flicker so small I almost ignored it. It was a Friday evening. Ethan had texted that he'd be working late again. He apologized, said his team was finalizing a property deal and they had to stay past midnight. I believed him, or at least I wanted to. But later that night, as I scrolled through social media out of boredom, something strange caught my eye, a story posted by a mutual friend. A restaurant I recognized. A familiar silhouette. It was blurry but unmistakable. Ethan, sitting across from someone. At first, I told myself maybe it was a client dinner. Maybe it was business. But as I looked closer, the woman sitting across from him wasn't just anyone. It was Lila. Her face was clear in the reflection of the glass window. And they weren't talking about real estate. They were laughing. The kind of laughter that belongs to comfort, not colleagues. My heart didn't just sink, it fractured. A quiet, invisible crack that reached somewhere deep inside me. Still, I didn't confront him right away, because love, when it's wounded, doesn't turn to anger instantly. It clings, it waits for an explanation. The next morning, I decided to pretend like nothing happened. I made breakfast, texted him good morning, and waited. He didn't reply. Hours passed. Then evening came. Finally, a message. "Sorry, babe. Rough day at work. Talk tomorrow, yeah?" No call, no emotion. Just distance wrapped in casual words. That was the day something inside me shifted. I stopped defending him in my own head. I started watching quietly, carefully. The small lies that once seemed harmless began to look like patterns. He'd say he was working late, but his phone location, something I had access to from a shared trip we once planned, would show him across town. He'd mention meeting clients, but there'd be no record of meetings in his calendar. He'd suddenly turn off his phone for hours, claiming low battery. One night, he left his phone charging in my kitchen and stepped out to take a call. A notification popped up. It was from Lila. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." My chest tightened. My fingers trembled. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. The truth was already loud enough. But I remember staring at that screen and thinking, this is the exact moment where my world begins to split. Before this, I was a woman in love. After this, I was a woman betrayed. That night, when he returned, he was all smiles. "Hey, I got us dinner from your favorite place," he said, setting down a takeout bag. I smiled back. "Thank you," I whispered, though my heart was screaming. He sat beside me, told me stories from work, kissed my forehead, and talked about the trip we'd one day take to Italy. I nodded along, memorizing every word, not because I believed them anymore, but because I needed to remember how good he was at lying. I wanted to see the mask up close before I tore it off. Over the next few days, I played along. I laughed when he texted jokes. I sent heart emojis when he sent voice notes saying he missed me. But behind that smile, I was learning how he spoke, when he lied, what he avoided. It wasn't about revenge yet, not then. It was about understanding who I'd been in love with. And the more I observed, the clearer it became. Ethan wasn't clumsy with lies, he was crafting them. Carefully, precisely, like an artist painting over cracks in his own story. He had routines, scripts, and I realized that the Ethan I loved never truly existed. A week later, I met my friend Maya for coffee. She'd always been protective, the kind who noticed what I didn't. "You seem off lately," she said, stirring her drink. "Everything okay with Ethan?" I hesitated. "I think so." Her eyes narrowed. "You think so?" I sighed, then told her everything: the restaurant photo, the message from Lila, the strange behavior. Maya listened quietly, then leaned closer. "Do you want to know the truth? Or do you want to stay in love?" That question hit harder than I expected, because part of me didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to keep believing in the story I'd built around him. But the other part, the quiet, angry, tired part, whispered, "You deserve the truth." That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his phone. I waited until he fell asleep on the couch, his phone still unlocked beside him. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow, but I did it anyway. I opened his messages, and there it was, her. Hundreds of texts, pictures, voice notes, plans, promises, dates that matched the nights he told me he was working late. "You looked so beautiful tonight. I wish I could wake up next to you. Don't worry, I'll tell her soon." Each message cut like glass. Each lie felt heavier than the last. But what broke me wasn't just the betrayal, it was the ease of it. How effortlessly he lived two lives, switching between them like changing outfits. He called both of us love. He promised both of us forever. He lied to both of us and smiled doing it. I put the phone down, staring at his sleeping face. He looked peaceful, innocent, like a man who'd never hurt anyone. For a moment, I thought about waking him up, about screaming, confronting, demanding answers. But then, I stopped, because I realized something important. If I confronted him now, I'd lose control. He'd manipulate, twist, deny like he always did. No. If he wanted to play games, I'd play better. The next morning, I acted normal. I kissed him goodbye before he left for work, then called in sick myself. I needed time to think, to plan, because what I was feeling wasn't just heartbreak anymore, it was purpose. Maya came over. We spent the whole afternoon piecing together the timeline, the texts, the lies, the overlaps. We even found Lila's social media, and that's when it all clicked. Her captions matched his work trips. Her photos matched his client dinners. And in one post, the restaurant I'd seen in that story, she'd tagged him. She didn't know he was in a relationship. She wasn't the villain. He was. The realization made something inside me go cold. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity. Over the next few days, I began collecting evidence, screenshots, call logs, even receipts from restaurants he said he'd never been to. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with them, but I knew one thing: Ethan's game was about to end. The funny part? He had no idea. He kept texting me sweet messages, kept planning dates, kept lying, oblivious to the fact that every word was another thread in the web I was spinning around him. It was almost poetic how he'd once played me like a fool, and now, unknowingly, he was giving me everything I needed to destroy his act. A week later, he invited me to dinner. "Our 6-month anniversary," he said, smiling. I smiled back. Of course. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That night, I watched him across the table, the same table where he'd once made me laugh, once promised forever. But this time, I wasn't looking at the man I loved. I was studying the man who'd betrayed me. Every lie had a rhythm, and I finally knew his. The way he'd look down when he lied. The way he'd change topics when he got too close to the truth. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. Halfway through dinner, he reached for my hand. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Perfect, just tired." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "You know I love you, right?" For the first time, I didn't say it back. I just stared, not at the man I thought I loved, but at the stranger I was about to expose. That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop and started writing. Every lie, every inconsistency, every date. It wasn't just a list. It was a record of how he built his fake world. And as I typed, I realized I wasn't writing for him. I was writing for me, to remember what I'd survived, to remind myself never to let anyone write my story again. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking outside. I sat by the window, watching the city wake up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm, not because it was over, but because I finally knew who I was without him. The truth hurts, yes, but it also heals. It burns away illusions until all that's left is strength. And mine was just starting to rise. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. No, this was just the pause before the storm. Because if Ethan thought he could walk away clean, he was about to learn that I'd stopped being his game piece. Now, I was the one holding the board. Some betrayals come like a thunderstorm, sudden, deafening, impossible to ignore. But Ethan's betrayal was quieter. It wasn't a crash. It was a slow leak. It drained the warmth from my world one small lie at a time until all that was left was silence. And me, sitting in the middle of it, trying to remember when love stopped feeling safe. I spent weeks pretending. Pretending to smile, to laugh, to care. Every word that left my mouth was a lie to cover his lies. But pretending has a weight, and it was crushing me. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my own reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the same Emma who used to dream about growing old with him. She looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much truth in a world that refused to face it. And that's when I knew. The pretending had to stop. It was a Thursday ordinary in every way, except for what it became. Ethan texted me in the morning, all charm and emojis. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Missed you." The irony made me laugh. Missed me? He'd probably sent the same message to Lila. By the time he arrived that evening, I'd already decided. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was simply going to let the truth do what it always does, burn away the lies. He walked in carrying flowers. Red roses, my favorite. Funny how someone could remember the smallest things about you and still forget to love you right. "Hey, baby," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I stepped back slightly, forcing a smile. Dinner's ready. We sat down. I'd made pasta his favorite and poured wine. The air was thick with something unsaid. He didn't notice. He never did. Halfway through dinner, I looked at him and said softly, "Ethan, can I ask you something?" He smiled, chewing. "Of course, what's up?" I held his gaze. "Who's Lila?" The fork froze mid-air. For the first time in months, I saw panic flicker in his eyes. "Lila," he repeated, trying to sound casual. "Oh, she's just a colleague. Why?" I smiled a small, knowing smile that probably terrified him more than if I'd screamed. "I saw your messages," I said quietly. "The ones you sent her. The ones where you told her you loved her." The color drained from his face. He put the fork down, clearing his throat. "Emma, listen." "No, you listen," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I've spent months pretending I didn't see it. Pretending you were still the man I fell in love with. But I'm done lying to myself." For a moment, silence filled the room. Heavy. Sharp. Then he sighed and leaned back. "Okay," he said almost too calmly. "You found out. Fine. But it's not what you think." I laughed bitter, hollow. "You told her you wished you could wake up next to her. How many ways can that mean something different, Ethan?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean to hurt you, all right? It just happened. Things were getting hard between us. You were distant." The classic reversal. The moment where the guilty man turns his sin into your fault. I stared at him, unable to believe how effortlessly he twisted the narrative. "So now it's my fault you lied to me." He leaned forward, tone sharp. "I'm saying, maybe if you'd been there more, if you hadn't been so focused on work, things wouldn't have fallen apart." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Ethan, do you even hear yourself? You betrayed me. You built an entire second life behind my back. And now you want to blame me for it?" He looked away, rubbing his temples. "I made a mistake, okay? I'm human." "No," I said quietly. "You're a coward." That made him look up, eyes cold now. "Careful, Emma." I smiled, not with fear, but with something stronger. "Or what? You'll lie again?" He stood up, pacing, the mask slipping off his face. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You've been snooping through my phone, stalking my location. I was just confirming what you made me doubt every day," I shot back. "The truth." He exhaled sharply, then turned to me, his expression softening, the manipulative calm returning. "Look, I messed up. But you and I were different. We have something real. Don't throw this away because of one mistake." One mistake? That was the moment my heart went quiet, because that's how little it meant to him, the lies, the betrayal, the nights I cried without him knowing, all reduced to one mistake. I stood up slowly. No, Ethan, you threw it away. You threw me away. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he always did when trying to regain control. You're overreacting, Emma. Don't do this. You'll regret it. I met his eyes. No, you will. He left that night angry, muttering something about needing space. I let him go because that's exactly what I needed too. Space, but not to think to plan. The next few days were a blur of emotion, sadness, anger, relief, then clarity. Because something remarkable happens when the person you trusted most betrays you, you stop being afraid of losing them. I spent hours talking to Maya, replaying the conversation, analyzing every word. He's not sorry, she said bluntly. He's sorry he got caught. And she was right. He wasn't texting me anymore. He wasn't apologizing or trying to fix things. He'd moved on, probably right back to Lila. But instead of crying, I started writing again not the story of what he did, but the story of who I was becoming. I turned my pain into pages, my heartbreak into paragraphs, and somewhere between the sentences I started smiling again. A week later, I got a text. Can we meet? I need to talk. It was Ethan, of course. They always come back when they realize their power's gone. I agreed to meet not out of hope, but curiosity. We met at the same cafe where we'd had our first date. Poetic, in a twisted way, he looked different, nervous, uneasy. Emma, he began, I've been thinking about us. I stayed silent, letting him speak. I made mistakes, okay? But what we had, it was real. I know I hurt you, but I can fix this. We can start over. I tilted my head. Does Lila know you're saying this? He froze. I ended things with her, he lied smoothly. It was a mistake. She means nothing to me. I smiled faintly. That's funny. She posted a picture with you just 2 days ago. His face fell. You're checking her social media? Not anymore, I said. I don't need to. I already know the ending. He sighed, frustrated. Emma, I'm trying here. Trying to what? I asked. Rewrite the story again? Paint yourself as the good guy? Ethan, you don't get to break me and then decide when I heal. He looked away, his voice sharp. You think you're better than me now? Because you're calm? Because you're acting like this doesn't hurt you? I leaned forward. It did hurt me. More than you'll ever know. But I survived it. And that's what makes me better not than you, but than who I was when I believed your lies. He stared at me, something flickering in his eyes, maybe guilt, maybe fear. I didn't think you'd actually walk away, he whispered. I smiled sadly. You never thought I'd stop playing your game. But I did, and now I'm the one choosing how it ends. That conversation ended with silence. He walked out, shoulders tense, phone buzzing in his pocket, probably Lila again. And for the first time, watching him leave didn't hurt. It felt freeing. That night, I deleted every picture, every message, every memory that chained me to him. I didn't do it out of hate. I did it out of peace. But the next morning, I got a call that changed everything. It was Lila. Her voice was trembling. Emma, I don't know if you know who I am, but I think we both deserve the truth. I went silent. Then she said, Ethan told me you two broke up months ago. But I found something, your photo, in his wallet. He's been lying to both of us. I closed my eyes. Yeah, I know. We met later that day, 2 women on opposite sides of the same lie. She looked hurt, confused, betrayed, just like I once did. We talked for hours. About him, about the lies, about how easily he played us both. And by the end of it, we weren't enemies. We were allies, quietly reclaiming our dignity from the man who thought he could own it. That night, I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means exposing someone not with fire, but with truth, letting their mask fall in front of the people they used to fool. And I knew exactly how to do it. The next few days, I began crafting my plan simple, poetic, and completely in my control. Ethan had a habit of presenting himself online as the perfect boyfriend, always posting quotes about loyalty, love, and respect. So I took screenshots, the quotes, the text, the dates. Then, with Lila's permission, I compiled them side by side. His "I'll never betray you" post beside his "Can't wait to see you tonight" text to her. Every lie exposed by his own words. I didn't post it publicly. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I sent it to everyone who mattered in his professional circle, his boss, his colleagues, his family. Not to ruin him, but to reveal him. By the time I hit send, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, peaceful. Because I wasn't doing it out of pain, I was doing it out of truth. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls. Ethan, of course. I didn't answer. He showed up at my door hours later, furious, desperate. "Why would you do that?" he shouted. "You ruined me." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Ethan, you ruined yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He stared at me, speechless like a man who just realized the mirror doesn't lie. Then, quietly, he turned and walked away. And just like that, so did the weight I'd been carrying for months. That night, as I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker, I thought about everything, the love, the lies, the loss. It didn't hurt anymore, because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's peace. I whispered to myself, game over. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. People often imagine revenge as something loud, a screaming confrontation, a slammed door, an explosion of anger. But real revenge is quiet. It's in the stillness when the truth finally speaks for itself. That's what I learned in the days after Ethan's downfall began. He'd stopped calling after I exposed him. The messages, once constant and manipulative, went silent. But silence can be a weapon too, and this time it was mine. For the first time in a long time, he was the one wondering. Wondering what I'd do next. Wondering who knew the truth. Wondering how much of his carefully built life was about to collapse. And the best part? I wasn't even trying to hurt him anymore. I was just done protecting him. It started small. A message to his boss, polite, professional, attached with screenshots. I didn't say much. Just enough to let the truth breathe. I thought you should know what kind of man represents your company's values online. No slander. No exaggeration. Just evidence. Because lies crumble faster when confronted with receipts. Then came the people who once pitied me, his friends, his colleagues, the ones who believed his version of the story. I didn't reach out to them directly. Instead, I let time do its job. Because when someone like Ethan is exposed, the mask doesn't fall in one moment, it peels off, piece by piece. And soon it wasn't me telling the story. It was everyone else connecting the dots. But the plan wasn't just about exposing him. It was about freeing myself and making sure I never fell for a man like Ethan again. So I started working on something new, a podcast. It was Maya's idea, actually. She said, "Why don't you turn your story into something that helps other people? You're good at telling stories, and there are thousands of women out there who've been through the same thing." At first, I laughed. "You think people want to hear about my heartbreak?" She looked at me and said, "Not your heartbreak, your comeback." And that hit differently. So I did it. I started recording. Not about Ethan by name, I wasn't giving him that power, but about the emotions, the confusion, the betrayal, the rediscovery. I called it Truth After Lies. And slowly, episode by episode, my pain began turning into purpose. Meanwhile, Ethan's life was unraveling in ways I didn't even anticipate. He tried to get ahead of the story, told everyone I was crazy, that I was trying to destroy him. But the thing about lies is that they lose their strength when the truth is already out there. One by one, people started distancing themselves. The promotions he bragged about? Suddenly on hold. The friends he partied with? Now whispering behind his back. He called me once late at night, his voice trembling with something between anger and desperation. "Why are you doing this to me, Emma?" he said. "You've made everyone turn against me." I took a deep breath before replying. "I didn't make anyone do anything, Ethan. I just stopped lying for you." He went silent, then hung up. That was the last time we spoke. But even as I was moving forward, there was a part of me still healing, still sorting through the ashes of what we once were. Because revenge might give closure, but healing gives peace. So I started journaling not about him, but about myself. Every entry began with the same line. "Today, I choose peace over pain." It became a ritual, a small act of rebellion against the version of me that used to cry over unanswered texts and broken promises. And slowly, I began to rebuild my world not around him, but around me. Then something unexpected happened. My podcast started gaining attention. People were messaging me from different countries, saying how my story gave them strength to walk away from toxic relationships. One message read, "You helped me see that I wasn't crazy, that trusting my intuition doesn't make me paranoid." Another said, "I was you once, and hearing you speak made me realize revenge isn't about hurting them, it's about choosing yourself again." Those messages became my fuel, because for the first time, I wasn't surviving his story, I was writing my own. But the true turning point came a month later, at an event I never expected to attend, his company's annual charity gala. It was ironic, really. The same event where Ethan had once paraded me around like a trophy. Now, I was attending as a guest speaker, invited by someone who had been inspired by my podcast. When I walked into that room, I could feel the whispers. People staring, trying to connect the dots between the woman who used to stand by Ethan's side and the one walking in now, confident, composed, unbothered. And there he was, across the room. Ethan. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just dimmer. The arrogance that once filled every room he entered was gone. Our eyes met for a moment. He froze. And I smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace. Because I'd already won the moment he stopped existing in my mind as someone I needed to prove anything to. After my speech about rebuilding after betrayal, about turning pain into power, people stood and clapped. Even he did, awkwardly, out of obligation. When I walked off stage, he approached me. "Emma," he said quietly, "you look amazing." I smiled politely. "Thank you." He hesitated. "Listen, I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of it." There was sincerity in his voice, maybe for the first time. But I'd learned by then that apologies don't undo actions. "I know," I said softly, "but I needed to go through it to find myself again." He nodded, looking down. "You really moved on, didn't you?" "Yes," I replied. "And I hope you do too." He smiled weakly. "You always were the strong one." Then he walked away. And for the first time, it wasn't a loss. It was closure. That night, as I sat in my car, I took a deep breath and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The same mirror I once stared into, wondering where I'd gone. Now, I could finally see her, the woman I'd fought to become. And I realized revenge had never really been about him. It was about me reclaiming everything he took: my confidence, my peace, my self-worth. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge isn't exposure or humiliation. It's evolution. It's showing up as someone so healed that they can no longer be hurt by the person who broke them. A few months later, the podcast crossed 1 million listeners. Sponsors reached out. Media outlets wanted interviews. But what mattered most weren't the numbers. It was the stories of the people who found strength through mine. There was one message that stayed with me. "Thank you, Emma. You turned your pain into a map for others to find their way out." That's when I finally understood something I'd been missing all along. I didn't end the game Ethan started. I rewrote it. One evening, as I recorded a new episode, I said into the mic, "Sometimes the people who hurt us think they've won because they left us broken. But what they don't see is that we're rebuilding quietly, powerfully, piece by piece. And when we rise again, we rise higher than their lies could ever reach." I paused, smiled, and whispered, "And that is the real ending to every betrayal story." Months passed. Life became peaceful, ordinary, the kind of ordinary I once thought I'd never enjoy again. Coffee in the morning, writing in the afternoons, calls with Maya, laughter that wasn't forced, sleep that wasn't haunted by questions. And sometimes I'd see Ethan's name pop up online, new job, new girlfriend, same pattern. But it didn't bother me anymore, because the version of me he could hurt no longer existed. I closed my journal one night, the last entry written neatly across the page. Forgiveness isn't saying they were right. It's saying they no longer have power. And beneath it, I added, "He played with my heart, but I ended the game my way." The words glowed softly in the lamplight like a final chapter written with peace instead of pain. I smiled, whispering to myself, "Game over." And this time, it wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of mine. There's a saying, truth doesn't need to scream. It just waits until the lies tire themselves out. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from telling someone exactly how much they hurt you. But now I know. Real closure happens when you no longer need to say anything at all. And yet, fate had one final act planned, a moment that would bring everything full circle. It happened on a Thursday morning. The air was still, the sky overcast, and my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Emma, you might want to see this. A friend." Attached was a link. A video link. I hesitated before opening it, years of instinct warning me that curiosity and pain often walked hand in hand. But something inside me said, "You're strong enough now." So I clicked. The video opened to a shaky camera phone recording someone filming a tense meeting in what looked like an office boardroom. And there, at the center of the storm, was Ethan. His company had just discovered that several client contracts were falsified, numbers altered, projects overstated, all to make him look more successful than he actually was. In the video, a man's voice shouted, "Ethan, these reports are all signed by you. Care to explain?" Ethan tried to argue, his voice defensive, his hands trembling slightly. I didn't do that." "Someone's framing me!" But the camera zoomed closer, catching the panic in his eyes, the kind of panic that comes not from innocence, but from knowing the truth has finally caught up. The board suspended him on the spot. And the irony? He'd built his whole career on pretending to be honest, loyal, perfect. Now, the mask had cracked in front of everyone who once admired him. As I watched, a strange calm washed over me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just peace. Because life had done what I no longer needed to. It had exposed him not through me, but through his own choices. Still, the story didn't end there. 2 days later, the video went viral. Someone had leaked it online. It spread like wildfire across social media, shared and reshared with captions like, "The truth always finds its way. When arrogance meets consequence." And in that digital chaos, my name started trending too, not because I had anything to do with it, but because people remembered my podcast. They started connecting the dots, saying, "Wait, isn't this the same Ethan she talked about without naming him? She warned everyone about people like him, and now look." Within hours, Truth After Lies hit record streams. My inbox filled with interview requests, and people were calling me brave, wise, resilient. But deep down, I wasn't celebrating his downfall. I was acknowledging my survival. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of the old cafe where Ethan and I had our first date. It was almost poetic, like life had led me there to close the loop once and for all. The cafe looked the same. The soft hum of background chatter, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, couples leaning across tables whispering promises. Only this time, I wasn't one of them. I was a woman who knew better. I sat at the same table, the one by the window, and smiled at the irony. It felt symbolic. I ordered my usual drink, the one Ethan used to order for me, and when it arrived, I raised it quietly to the empty chair across from me. "To the girl I used to be," I whispered. "The one who believed lies because she saw potential instead of truth." And then, softly, "To the woman I am now who finally knows the difference." That afternoon, I decided to do something bold. I opened my laptop, hit record, and spoke directly to my audience. This isn't a story about revenge anymore. This is a story about growth. I used to think that getting even would fix the pain, but it doesn't. What heals is when you outgrow the person who broke you. When you rise so high they can't reach you, not even in memory. I paused, feeling tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of truth finally spoken. You don't need to destroy them. Life will handle that. You just need to rebuild you. That's the real victory. I uploaded the episode, not knowing it would become the most listened to one I'd ever made. Weeks later, I got an unexpected email. It was from Ethan. Subject: a letter you'll probably ignore. I almost deleted it. But curiosity and maybe closure made me open it. "Emma, I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I deserve what happened. But I need you to know, you were right about everything. The lies caught up to me. I lost my job, my friends, my reputation. But the worst part isn't losing all that, it's realizing I lost you, the only person who ever genuinely cared. If there's one thing I learned, it's that hurting someone who truly loved you is like burning a bridge you can never rebuild. I hope you're happy. You deserve it, Ethan. I read it twice. Once with anger, once with empathy. Then, without replying, I archived it. Because not every story needs a reply. Some just need an ending. And the ending came quietly, a few weeks later, during a radio interview. The host asked me, "If you could say one thing to the person who betrayed you, what would it be?" I smiled slightly, leaned into the mic, and said, "Thank you." The host looked surprised. "Thank you? For what?" "For showing me what I should never accept again. For breaking me just enough that I learned how to rebuild stronger. For teaching me that revenge doesn't mean hurting someone. It means healing so completely that their actions can no longer touch you." The studio went silent. And in that silence I felt the weight of every woman, every man, every person who had ever been betrayed finally exhale with me. As weeks turned into months, my life took a beautiful, unexpected turn. I was invited to speak at universities about emotional resilience, about trusting your instincts, about rebuilding after betrayal. The podcast grew into a community, a safe space where people shared their own stories of heartbreak and survival. And sometimes I'd receive messages that started with, "Because of your story, I finally left." Those words, they meant everything, because they proved that my pain had a purpose. One evening, as I stood backstage at a live podcast event, hundreds of people waiting in the audience, I looked down at the note card in my hand. It simply said, "Tell the truth, not for revenge, but for release." I smiled. That had become my motto. The lights dimmed, and the host announced my name. Applause filled the room as I walked onto the stage. I took a deep breath and began. Once upon a time, I loved someone who taught me what betrayal feels like. But what he didn't know is that he also taught me who I really am. The crowd went silent, the kind of silence that listens. He played with my heart, but I learned how to end the game with grace, not bitterness. I looked around at the audience faces lit by soft light, eyes full of emotion. And if you're sitting here today holding on to a heartbreak, remember this. The person who broke you doesn't define your story. You do. The applause that followed was deafening, not for me, but for the truth. Because everyone there knew what it felt like to rise after being broken. After the show, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered, the sound of distant laughter echoing through the streets. For the first time, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt wide open. Maya joined me, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "You did it," she said softly. "You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something powerful." I smiled. "Maybe that's the only real revenge, turning your pain into purpose." She nodded. "And peace." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when you know the storm has passed. That night, I walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights, thinking about how far I'd come. From the broken girl who once cried over betrayal, to the woman who turned that betrayal into a legacy. Before going to bed, I opened my journal one last time and wrote, "Revenge isn't ending their story. It's beginning yours." Then I turned off the light. The game was truly over, and I had finally won. It's strange how quiet life becomes after the storm. There are no more sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, no more phone vibrations that make your heart drop, no more rehearsed speeches of what you would have said if you got one more chance. And in that silence, peace. It took me a long time to realize that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build, brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. It was a Sunday morning when I noticed it for the first time, the feeling of calm. The sun was filtering through my curtains, painting warm lines across my floor. The world outside moved at its own pace, children laughing, a dog barking, someone playing soft music. And there I was, sitting by the window with my cup of tea, realizing that for once I wasn't waiting for anyone to text, to call, to explain, or to make me feel seen. I already was seen by myself. I looked at the reflection in the glass, tired eyes. Yes, but softer. The kind that had cried enough to understand what truly mattered. There was something new in my face, not pain, not pride, but peace. I whispered to my reflection, "You made it." People often think healing is this beautiful cinematic thing, like one day you wake up and suddenly everything makes sense again. But it's not. It's messy, uneven, full of contradictions. Some days I felt powerful, untouchable, like the queen of my own comeback story. Other days I felt small, like every step forward came with a ghost pulling me back. And that's okay, because healing isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about learning how to live beautifully despite it. I started doing small things, going for morning walks, painting again, reconnecting with old friends I had drifted from because I was too busy revolving my world around Ethan. I even started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young women who were dealing with toxic relationships, heartbreak, and self-doubt. At first, I thought I was there to help them, but truthfully, they were helping me. Every time I said the words, "You deserve better," I felt like I was talking to my past self, the girl who stayed too long, forgave too easily, loved too hard. And with every story I heard, every tear wiped away, I realized I wasn't alone. None of us are. It happened when I least expected it, like most meaningful moments do. It was nearly a year after everything fell apart. I was speaking at a small event, Healing After Betrayal. The crowd was intimate, maybe 50 people. I stood there, sharing my story, not the names, not the drama, just the truth. How pain can become your teacher. How silence can become your answer. Afterward, as I was packing up my notes, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Emma?" I froze. I hadn't heard that voice in almost a year, but it still hit me in the chest like a wave. I turned around and there he was, Ethan. He looked smaller, not physically but in presence. The confidence he used to wear like armor had cracked. His eyes looked tired, his expression uncertain. For a moment, neither of us said a word. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ceiling lights. Then he spoke. "I didn't come here to make things awkward. I came to listen, to understand." I nodded slowly. "And did you?" He swallowed hard. "Yeah, more than I expected." He looked down, fidgeting with his hands, a gesture I remembered too well. "You were right about me. About everything. I was selfish, scared. I hurt the one person who actually believed in me. There was a time when those words would have broken me all over again. But now they just felt distant. "I know," I said softly, "but it's okay. You were part of my story, not the end of it." He looked up, searching my face for anger, maybe forgiveness. But what he saw instead was acceptance. "You seem different," he said quietly. "Because I am," I replied. "You taught me what I never want to become. And for that, I'm grateful." There was a long pause. He nodded, almost tearfully, then whispered, "Take care of yourself, Emma." "You too," I said, and turned to leave. No dramatic goodbye, no lingering tension, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally close the door, not out of anger, but out of freedom. After that day, everything felt lighter. Like a final weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I poured my energy into the podcast. It grew from a storytelling project into something far bigger. A global community of people reclaiming their power after betrayal. We started doing live events, online discussions, even collaborations with therapists and life coaches. I turned the pain that once silenced me into a platform that helped others speak. It was strange, every story I heard mirrored mine in some way. Different names, different details, same heartbreak. But the beauty was always the same, the comeback. People would write to me, "Your story helped me leave. Because of you, I finally chose myself. Thank you for showing that revenge doesn't have to be cruel, it can be healing." Those messages became my strength. They reminded me that every scar I carried had meaning, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. One evening, Maya and I sat on her balcony watching the city lights flicker below. It had become our ritual: tea, laughter, truth. "You ever think you'll fall in love again?" she asked. I smiled, watching the horizon. "Maybe. But next time, it'll be different." "How so?" "Next time, I'll choose peace over passion, clarity over chaos. And I'll never, ever shrink myself to fit into someone else's world again." She grinned. "That's growth, babe." "No," I laughed. "That's survival." We clinked our mugs together, the soft sound echoing like a promise between two women who had seen too much and yet refused to become bitter. Months later, I was invited to record the first live episode of my podcast in a real studio, something I'd dreamed of since the beginning. The producer asked, "What's this episode about?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. Closure. When the red light blinked on and the mic picked up my voice, I took a deep breath and began. Once upon a time, I thought revenge was about getting even, but I've learned that true revenge is peace. It's waking up without anger, looking back without bitterness, and moving forward without fear. I paused, letting the silence sink in. He played with my heart, yes, but I ended the game not by destroying him, but by rebuilding me. Later that night, I went for a quiet walk by the water. The air was cool, the moonlight gentle, the world impossibly calm. I sat on a bench overlooking the city, the same city that had witnessed my heartbreak and rebirth. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You did it, Emma. You turned the pain into purpose." A soft breeze brushed against my hair, as if the universe itself was agreeing. I thought back to everything, the lies, the tears, the empty nights, the silent prayers. All of it had led me here, stronger, softer, wiser. And in that moment, I finally understood the ending I once wanted so badly with him was never mine to have. Because my story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. So, here's what I learned and what I want anyone listening to remember. You don't need to get even. You just need to get free. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who couldn't see it. And you don't need to carry their guilt, let them live with their choices. Because the real victory is when your peace becomes louder than their betrayal. When your silence speaks the truth, they'll never escape. And when you can finally look back and say, that pain didn't destroy me. It shaped me. I stood up from the bench, smiled at the moon, and whispered one last time not to Ethan, but to myself. The game is over, and this time, I truly won. Then I walked away, not looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood some stories end, so better ones can begin. Some stories end in chaos. Some end in closure, and some end in quiet strength. When I look back at everything that happened, the love, the betrayal, the silence, the revenge, I realize it was never really about Ethan. It was always about me, about who I became through it all. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about exposing anyone, or making them pay, or proving them wrong. It's about choosing yourself loudly, unapologetically, and completely. For a long time, I saw myself as the victim. The girl who was lied to, cheated on, made to feel small. But one day, I caught myself mid-thought and asked, why am I still calling myself that? Because victims stay in their story. Survivors rewrite it. And that's what I did. I stopped replaying the pain and started rewriting the meaning. Every tear became a seed. Every setback a step. Every goodbye a gate to a new beginning. I learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, you don't need them to see your worth anymore. People often ask me, did you forgive him? And my answer surprises them. Yes, I did. But not for him, for me. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back into your life. It's about letting the anger leave your life. Because anger is heavy. It anchors you to the past. Drags you back into moments that no longer deserve your energy. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is freedom. It's saying you no longer control how I feel or who I become. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll never forget what Ethan did not because I want to hold on to it, but because it reminds me of who I'll never be again. If you've ever been betrayed, you probably know that the first instinct is to get even, to make them feel what you felt, to show them they messed with the wrong person. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Revenge built on anger burns everything, even you. The real revenge is when you build a life so calm, so beautiful, that they can't touch it anymore. When they see you laughing again, not pretending, but truly laughing. When you glow differently, not for them, but for yourself. When you stop looking back not because you forgot, but because you finally outgrew the pain. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't just silence them, it transforms you. When I shared my story publicly, I didn't know it would touch so many hearts. Thousands of messages poured in from women and men who had lived through similar betrayals. They said things like, your pain was my mirror. I finally left my toxic partner after watching your story. You gave me courage I didn't know I had. And that's when it hit me, healing isn't just personal. It's powerful. Because when you heal out loud, you give others permission to do the same. Every story becomes a spark. Every voice becomes a ripple. And eventually, those ripples turn into waves of people refusing to settle for pain disguised as love. That's the beauty of storytelling. You think it's about your heartbreak, but really, it's about humanity. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, the one who ignored red flags, made excuses, and begged for honesty, I'd tell her this. Love should never make you feel less than yourself. If someone truly cares, they won't make you chase their attention, compete with their ego, or beg for their respect. Love is supposed to feel safe. It's supposed to grow you, not drain you. It's supposed to feel like coming home, not surviving a storm. But when it doesn't, you walk away, even if your voice shakes, even if your heart breaks. Because walking away from someone who doesn't value you is the loudest way to say, I finally value myself. I remember the night I first planned my revenge. My heart was full of anger burning, raw, unstoppable. I wanted Ethan to feel what I felt. I wanted him to lose everything. But as time went on, I realized I didn't need to break him. He was already living in the consequences of his choices. So instead, I rebuilt me. I used the same energy I once spent crying over him to create something meaningful, to grow, to heal, to help others. And you know what's ironic? The moment I stopped trying to get even, life started giving me everything I once thought I lost. New opportunities, new peace, new love in forms I never imagined. One of the most powerful things I heard during my healing came from an older woman I met at a retreat. She said, "Sweetheart, the universe always balances itself. You don't need to punish anyone, just keep your hands clean and your heart open." And she was right. People who hurt others will always face themselves one day. Not through karma or fate, but through emptiness. Because the truth catches up. Always. You don't need to wish them pain. You just need to wish yourself peace. There's something deeply sacred about letting go. It's not a one-time act, it's a process. 1,000 tiny decisions to release what no longer serves you. Every time I stopped checking his social media. Every time I didn't respond to a memory. Every time I chose silence instead of explanation, I was letting go. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because holding on doesn't keep them close, it keeps you stuck. When I finally released the story, truly released it, I realized my heart had space again. Space for new dreams, new people, new joy. That's when you know you're free, when the thought of them no longer steals your peace. A few months later, something beautiful happened. I got an email from a young woman named Lena. "Emma, I saw your story online. I was in the same kind of relationship, manipulative, draining, full of betrayal. I wanted to hurt him back, but after watching you, I decided to walk away instead. I'm starting over, and I've never felt lighter. Thank you for helping me see that peace is the real power, because in that moment I realized my story had come full circle. The pain I once thought was pointless had become someone else's hope. My heartbreak had become healing not just for me, but for others too. And that's when I knew everything had purpose. What I learned about revenge. Here's what I want everyone listening to remember. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. It's not about making someone pay. It's about making yourself proud. True revenge isn't loud. It doesn't scream or post or prove. It's quiet. It's calm. It's the peace of knowing you outgrew the pain they tried to trap you in. That's the kind of revenge that lasts forever. Now, when I think about Ethan, there's no hate left, just gratitude. He was the storm that taught me how to rebuild. He was the test that taught me my strength. He was the ending that taught me how to begin again. And I mean this when I say it, I don't regret what happened. Because if it hadn't, I would have never found me. If you've ever been broken, betrayed, or blamed for someone else's actions, I want you to know this. You will rise again. Not overnight, not without tears, but you will. You'll wake up one day and realize the pain that once defined you has now refined you. You'll look at your scars and see strength. You'll look at your past and feel gratitude, not grief. Because that's what real healing looks like, turning heartbreak into healing and revenge into rebirth. So don't chase closure, create it. Don't beg for justice, be it. Don't wait for them to regret it. Just keep walking until peace feels like home. He played with my heart, but in the end, I became the one who rewrote the rules of the game. Because sometimes the best way to win is to stop playing altogether. To anyone listening who's still in the middle of it, who's crying in silence, second-guessing their worth, replaying the lies, please hear me when I say this. You are not weak for loving deeply. You are not foolish for trusting someone who fooled you. You are human. But now it's time to take your power back, to rebuild, to rise, to glow again. Because love didn't break you, their betrayal did. And you are not their betrayal. You are your comeback. You are your peace. You are the story that starts again, stronger than before. So let them wonder how you healed so beautifully. Let them see the glow they can never dim, because your revenge is your rebirth.